welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. For our 99th episode, we have a very special guest. I talk with USA women's hockey legend Julie Chu, who also happens to be the head coach of the Canadian U Sports reigning champion, Concordia Stingers. We discuss her amazing playing career at Harvard and with 4 Olympic teams and even more world championships. In addition, she details her coaching career in the NCAA and her incredible success with Concordia in Montreal. This is our first guest from a Canadian University women's team, so we started at the top. Please enjoy this conversation with Julie Chu. Introducing Champs Plus, our latest recruiting and development copilot tool designed to guide parents and players through every step of the journey to women's college hockey. With Champs Plus, gain access to exclusive recruiting insights, expert advice, and hockey development resources tailored just for you. Attend our monthly expert-led webinars covering timely topics throughout the recruiting cycle. Submit your questions before or during the webinar to get answers straight from the experts. New to the women's college recruiting process? Explore our age-specific playbooks for 12U, 14U, 16U, and 19U girls. These guides help you navigate the path to playing women's college hockey. For those further along, dive into our extensive library of articles and videos, discover insights on summer recruiting events, June 15th preparations, and the value of taking a gap year. With new, highly curated content added weekly, Champs Plus ensures you will always have the latest information to boost your recruiting efforts and enhance your hockey skills. Got questions? As a Champs Plus member, you can submit recruiting questions anytime through our app and get personalized answers that are published to the entire community. Feeling overwhelmed by the recruiting process? Coming soon, we will have Champs Plus discussion groups where parents and players share advice and experiences based on where they are in their journey. Visit Champs Plus now and unlock access to more recruiting insights, player development advice, and expert guidance for a fraction of the cost of a traditional advisor. I am very excited to welcome Julie Chu, head coach of the Concordia Stingers women's hockey program, to the podcast. Bear with me as I try to quickly summarize her legendary career. Originally from Bridgeport, Connecticut, Julie attended Choate Rosemary Hall Prep, but graduated high school from the Northwood School, which I am assuming is because she played on the U.S. women's national team at the World Championships and in her first Olympics, even before attending Harvard University. During her playing career, Julie was a 5-time world champion, 4-time Olympic medalist, Patty Kaz Award winner, and Clarkson Cup winner with the Montreal Canadiens. Julie also coached at Minnesota Duluth and Union College before becoming the assistant coach of the Stingers in 2014 and then becoming the head coach in 2016. Julie has led the team to 3 straight appearances in the Canadian U Sports Women's Hockey Final, winning in 2022 and this past season. Welcome to the podcast, Julie.
Thank you for having me, Ray.
It's an honor to have you. Thank you so much for doing this. Very pleased to have our first Canadian U Sports coach on the podcast after going through one coach from every coach in the U.S. Division I ranks. And of course, we've had many of your teammates from the U.S. Olympic team and national team over the last couple of years. But why don't we start off like we do all our guests, just sharing a little bit about how you first started playing hockey and what made you such a great hockey player.
No, absolutely. So I grew up in Connecticut, and unlike some people that I'm surrounded with now up in Canada, we didn't have a huge hockey background in our family. My dad was from China. He met my mom in New York City. And so they knew about the New York Rangers and at the time the Hartford Whalers, but that's about it. So I think for me, I just happened to fall into hockey because my brother played and asked to play. So other than that, I don't know if I would have gotten into hockey. But once I did start, I think one of the best things and most important parts of it was I was in an environment that was supportive, that was caring, and treated me like another hockey player. Because back in 1990, when I started, there weren't a lot of other girls playing. So I think for me to be welcomed into an environment was really the number one key for me loving hockey and then wanting to work hard at it and develop and grow and kind of go through the ebbs and flows and evolution of girls hockey, which is what I experienced in my growth.
Gotcha. And so, I know your parents first put you in figure skates because they thought you might be the next Christy Yamaguchi, who's from my neck of the woods in California. And then, you immediately wanted to play, ice hockey very quickly, and loved, doing the cones on your first time out for a couple of hours. So, how did you transition, that initial start of, learn to play hockey to being such a great hockey player? Like, was it the coaching that you got? Was it the ice time? Was it your parents driving you to rink so that you could just keep up with the boys? How did you become such a good player at such a young age?
I think it's a combination of all of it. Again, it goes back to making sure that you feel welcomed in the environment. And when you do, we can love what we do. And I think when we have a drive and we enjoy what we're doing, then there's a lot of possibilities to be able to do the next thing. I also played soccer when I was growing up and I really enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. I didn't have this huge passion. So I didn't spend extra time trying to go to camps. I didn't spend extra time, in my garage or in front of the TV, stick handling or dribbling the ball because I didn't have the same passion. So I think for me, the transition really happened in starting in hockey and transitioning to it and just really enjoying myself. And when we have that base, then next thing you know, we work harder in practices and we listen more. And then we have great coaches that help guide and help develop our skills. And then I have a passion to then go to camps and then at the camps get a chance to really get exposed to great coaches and great skills and foundational development. And because I had that great foundation, then from there, I can start to add more and more in my experience. But I think if I'm over talking to young hockey players or to parents that are thinking, "Hey, what's the key?" Well, I think the key is actually making sure that your child loves what they're doing. And if they do, they're going to stay in it. They're going to work harder and they're going to want to add more to it as they get older. And I think the last thing that's harder to do nowadays is I was a multi-sport athlete. I played soccer all the way through high school. And we had more seasons. I didn't touch my skates as much in the summer. I was still training, but I did less of that. And I think finding that balance and that sweet spot is going to be really important, especially now because there's more and more and more opportunities to get on the ice, to train, to specialize. So how do we balance that as parents?
Now, I mentioned in the intro that you went to Choate Rosemary Hall Prep. Related to what you just said, what was the decision to go to prep school? I'm assuming you played hockey, but you also played multiple sports there. So was that also part of what you were referring to of being a multi-sport athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, like we have three kids in my family and every one of us took a different path. And so from my experience, I was exposed to some teammates. I was part of the Connecticut Polar Bears organization as well. And so when I was part of there was a lot of prep school kids, and that's kind of very common in New England. And so it just caught my eye. And so we started visiting schools and we loved the idea of being able to be a student athlete and to have an incredible educational experience because that was really important for myself and for my family. And then also being able to combine that with the opportunity to play sports within the high school. So it made it really easy and accessible. You went to your classes and right away you're at practice. There wasn't a ton of travel time. So you got this really cool experience there. So that did allow me to play soccer in the fall, and then I played hockey, and I didn't really have a spring sport. So I ended up playing softball in the spring, and then and then in the summers had my summers to do what I wanted to do is to train and have fun with that as well.
So you quickly got identified by USA Hockey as an elite hockey player at such a young age. So maybe to just talk about how you were able to play in the Olympics before even going to university, going to Harvard. There's been very rare, do players do that. There are recent examples like Kayla Barnes and Caroline Harvey, but it's
Yeah.
still very uncommon. And of course, their defense, you're a forward, so even harder to be a goal scorer at that age. So maybe just talk about that process of how you were able to be so successful at the national level, so at such a young age.
Yeah, no, I think like times have changed a lot, but they're still similar in some ways. So I think it's wherever team that you're a part of is can you be a great teammate and can you add value to your team and execute when you're playing? So through that process, you go to showcases, not as many showcases as there are now, but it was more tournaments. So there's big tournaments throughout the year. And most of those big tournaments, there's scouts and coaches going to them because it's, you get the best bang for your buck in some ways because you get to see a lot of players within a condensed time and good competition. So I think in those events, then I started getting acknowledged and recognized by college coaches in the radar. And then you go to in the States. we go into our regional tryouts. So similar in Canada where they might be provincial tryouts to play for their provincial camps, we had that in the regional area. So I did regional camps starting when I was young, maybe 12, 13 years old. And then after that, they had the opportunity to qualify for our national, development camps on the girls' side, which at the time, I believe it was like maybe U15, and then maybe there was a U16, U17 age group. So I think it was just going through that process, right? It's not suddenly we played, someone sees you, and then now we're in the national team. It's recognizing that we have all these little steps from being a great teammate on our club teams or high school teams, and then moving on to our regional tryouts, our provincial tryouts, and being able to excel and do well and absorb all the content, all the experience that I can in the regional experience, and then getting opportunities to then go to the national one. And I remember my first national team camp, it was in Lake Placid, New York, which we have a really big training center there. It was a U15 camp, and I was terrible. I absolutely was. And I remember this really clearly because I was so overwhelmed by the experience. I was so kind of intimidated by it. And although I had done very well on my club team, getting now to be with the best and be with everything, it was kind of the overthinking when happened. And I wasn't good. And I remember walking away from there and being like, that probably could have been better. But thankfully, I wasn't judged on just one camp, and I continued to work hard to be a good teammate. I didn't let one experience deter me. And I got an opportunity to get invited back to other opportunities. And after your first one, then you can just adjust, you adapt, and I settled. And I like to think that I got better along the way.
Perfect. All right. So, and I'm assuming that's why you finished your high school at Northwood, because it's in Lake Placid, and they're basically,
Yeah, I actually just did a part of my schooling at Northwood.
yeah,
So I was in a full-time, my last year I had the opportunity to be a full-time residence with the US national team, so the senior
right.
team. But it was in my last year at Choate. So my parents were kind of like, well, you can't do it unless you can finish high school that year. So thankfully, I was able to work with Choate and Northwood to be able to have a tutor. Steve Reed there, he's unbelievable. And he helped me to take care of my English courses that I would need to be able to graduate. So I did one-on-one English 3 times a week at night after our training with him in a one-on-one setting, and he was incredible. So I did that, and then I actually returned to Choate for the spring and graduated from Choate afterwards.
Perfect. All right. Now it all makes sense. Now I get that
Yeah,
the order of
it's a little
progression.
complicated. It's a little complicated.
All right. So your Olympic experiences have been very well documented. Folks just need to, go to YouTube or Google, and then they can find a whole bunch of stuff. So I'd like to really get to, some really specific questions about the Olympics. Let's get to the most important one. I used to work at Procter and Gamble, and I had friends work in the Bounty
Yeah.
plant. And so I want to understand how you got the Bounty commercial, because that actually was pretty eye-opening for me. I'd been watching, P&G commercials for years, and never had seen a commercial about hockey from P&G, never seen one about women's hockey, and let alone, an Asian American focus of the commercial, which was awesome. Especially,
Yeah.
even 10 years ago, that still wasn't very common. So maybe just talk about how you ended up being, one of the spokespeople for Bounty.
Yeah, and I think that P&G was an incredible supporter, and they had a thank you mom program that was absolutely wonderful. Because I do think that a lot of times the athlete is at the spotlight, but oftentimes our parents and especially our moms are in the background, and the countless hours and the care and the love that they show actually help mold us to be able to be elite athletes. So their program was great, and I think just being one of the veteran players and leaders on the team, they decided that it was going to be a good partnership, and both of our values lined up in what we believed in, and so I was able to partner with them. And it was awesome heading into my last Olympics. And so with that, obviously they have a lot of products, and Bounty was the one that we were able to partner with more specifically, and I get a chance to highlight my mom. And that is my mom in the commercial. I think sometimes goes, is that really your mom? And I'm like, that is my mom. I don't think I'll be a full-time actress anytime soon, but it was really cool to get to experience that with her, and to then, yeah, exactly as you said, bring women's hockey and just hockey to the forefront, and kind of what I guess we can say, an everyday commercial of a product that's in a lot of our homes.
Yeah. So, what was the actual biggest thing you actually broke in your house when you were playing while you were a kid? Because that's the focus of the commercial.
Well, there are three of us and we like to play everywhere. So our basement was pretty torn up. So all the walls and everything were all torn up. And until we were moved out, my parents decided that they weren't going to actually like repair the walls or anything because we'd shoot downstairs. We'd play roller hockey and obviously someone would get bumped into the wall and there goes like an elbow through the drywall. But once my brother, sister, and I, we did break our parents' wedding frame. So
Ooh.
it was in our living room and we are playing soccer, obviously very important in the living room, and someone kicked it and kind of broke it. But it was a pretty clean break. So I have to admit that what we did was we actually just super glued it together and put it back on the top shelf. And they didn't know for a while later until they were actually cleaning the shelf. So eventually by that point, they probably just laughed and that the fact that we were clever enough to super glue it back together and pretend like nothing happened.
Okay, good. But they did find out. So, okay, I got you.
Yes, they
All right.
did.
So, I've had a couple of other folks who you were that were part of the Olympic teams that you were on, including Colleen Hacker, who talked about a lot of the mental preparation. Janelle Sergey, and actually, let me ask you about that question. So when I talked to Janelle about, and by the way, she's an assistant coach at St. Cloud State. I asked her about
Yes, absolutely.
about her medals. I want to ask you how you feel about your medals, because when I talked to her and I said, hey, what's it like to win silver? Her response to me was very blunt. It says, "We didn't win silver, we lost gold." So, what's your
Yeah.
perspective on your medals?
Yeah, no, I think it's tough because when you are in a gold medal game, like ultimately you lose that game and to be able to win a medal that day, right? So, if anything though, you end up winning the silver medal because that's what you ensure in the semifinal game. So it's a little bit of this bittersweet because we're competitors. We want to win. We want that final score to say that we won and not our opponent. So there is a little bit of bitterness right in the moment. But I think for myself, as time passes and I think there's a real appreciation of what we got a chance to experience. And especially after my last Olympics, um, it was tough, right? My last Olympics was 2014. We were up to nothing. And, a shot goes off of, one of our players into the net. And now it's, one goal game. And we know how the rest of that story kind of went. And so, it was a really, really challenging one to afterwards because that was truly kind of the heartbreak of us, of myself, and knowing that that was the last time I was going to wear the jersey. But I think for me, what came out of it is when I got a chance to go back, and I went back and got a chance to share at the time my medals with my niece and my nephews. And so at the time my oldest niece was only 5 years old, and I remember, at the time I was showing it to the other ones. And, you had our youngest one who was maybe a year and a half looked at it and he licked it. And I was like, all right, well, that's one way. And then you have our another one that's probably around 3 years old that looks at it and she goes, "This is beautiful." So it kind of puts things into perspective a bit. And then the last part was then my oldest niece, who was right around kindergarten, so kind of learning how to read and write. Had like she came over with this piece of paper, had a bunch of things stapled, and every page she wrote something. It says my February journal, and then would write something. My February journal. I love my mom, and drew a little stick figure. Then I love my dad, drew a little bit more. And I was thinking, okay, she's going through the whole family. And the next page says, I love USA. And there was a picture of a hockey player. And she goes, you know what? That's a girl hockey player. And one day I want to play in the Olympics. And literally, I just stopped in my track. And I think it put a lot of things into perspective. And it doesn't mean that she was going to get to the Olympics. And maybe the next year she wouldn't like hockey. But at least at 5 years old, she suddenly had the chance to dream about being a hockey player and a girl hockey player. And she didn't think that girls playing hockey was weird. So I think that for me, allows me, after the bitterness and the disappointment, it's okay to be disappointed, subsides, to be really appreciative of what I got a chance to experience in Olympics and really proud of what we were able to accomplish as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so I got one last Olympic question. So it's great to hear that you're totally cool with how everything all worked out. But 2014, just making the team was a battle. So we had Lindsay Fry on.
Yeah.
She's of the Arizona Cachinas, and she spoke about fighting for a spot alongside you just to
Yeah.
make the team. Maybe just talk about the struggle of like how challenging it is when you're no longer at your peak and you're battling to to stay with the team.
Absolutely. I think we always talk about what are our values? What do we believe in? And so when I was at Harvard, one of the things I got introduced to was this concept of team first. And it actually came from the players because I think they went through a patch before I got there where players started to care more about points. They started to care more about the individual part and were selfish. And so for the credit of our veteran players that came before, they decided, okay, how do we come up with a model that's going to be powerful? So team first was what they came up with, and they introduced to me when I first came into the locker room on my recruiting trip, and then it stuck and it resonated with me. And ultimately, how do we be great teammates and really put our team before ourselves? And so when I was heading into my career, so that was in 2002 when I joined the Harvard team. So now we're 2014. So during that time frame, in some ways, I kind of had the easy role. And it was easy to be team first because I was playing in nearly every situation. I was playing a lot. I was on teams and pretty confident in my execution of being able to make teams. But heading into 2014, that was different, right? Our younger players were really talented. They were skilled. They were fast. I wasn't getting any faster, but I was hopefully bringing some leadership qualities and some other aspects of my game that could help complement what our younger players were able to bring into our team environment. So now suddenly I went from playing a regular shift. I went to playing maybe say 15, 20 minutes a game to playing 3 or 4. I ended up being on the bubble. I was in and out of lineups. So now suddenly my idea of what my value was of team first, I was challenged on it. And I'd like to say that I was able to live up to my values and still be a great teammate, find ways to stay engaged on the bench and give, not be kind of that negative person that was complaining about not having ice time or being in that role. The reality is that was the role I was given and where I deserved to be. And so I could decide and I make a choice, like, how was I going to live that role? Was I going to embody it and be a great teammate and still give to my team? Or is I going to complain that I was only playing 3 minutes a game? So for me, that was a really big part of it. And I think that Lindsay did the same thing. She was incredible. And I know it could have very easily been me not on the team as well. So I think that's why I never take anything for granted. And I think there's a lot of tremendous players, and we have to be willing to do what's asked of us, even if we might want another role. That's okay. We can always want more, but we still are ultimately given a role, and it's our job to be able to execute that. And that's what I tried to do in 2014.
Perfect. All right, we're going to come back to team first a little bit later on when we get to Concordia. But one of the connections between the Olympic team, and we got to move on now to Harvard, is Katie Stone. So here's my question for you. Would you consider 56 points in 32 games, 15 goals in 41, not a great season?
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Because to me,
Probably okay.
that's a top 10, scoring thing. But my understanding is that you believe your second year at Harvard, 56 points in 32 games isn't so great. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And what,
Yeah,
can you
I
explain
had
that?
a little bit. Yeah. So I think for me, like obviously my first year, like everything was going in that. And also when you play with a player like Jennifer Bottrell, who was in her last year and was a tremendous player. And I think she had maybe, I don't even know for sure, but she had over 100 points that season. It's probably easy to get points also. But I think for me, I kind of, it's not really only about the points. I think when I look at it, and it's funny because even at the end of my first year, someone goes like, do you know you had this many points? I go, I have no clue how many points I had because one, I didn't even know where to check for it. I was like kind of that person that just stayed in the moment. But to be honest, in my second year, because someone said that, like it suddenly became something I was aware of, and I didn't like that. And so not that it became something where I was aware of and only tried to get points, but at least I was aware of. And I think that that probably deterred me to some extent. But then beyond that, I think it's just we always kind of go through transitions, and there's going to be some seasons where we feel really good about the way we execute, and it could lead to goals, assists, points, whatever, and it could not. But I just felt in that second year it was my overall execution, I was just a little bit more off, and it doesn't matter about the goal, the points itself. I think it was just the overall feeling about, okay, how was my impact, how was I able to to execute in these scenarios and these situations. And I think so that's why I think for myself, when I said I didn't feel as great about that year, I think that was it. It was trying to feel, okay, did I feel like I was in a rhythm? Did I feel like I was executing not only just scoring and stuff, but the other parts of my game, which are typically actually some of my stronger parts of the game as well. And I think that's why it wasn't, I was a little disconnected. And maybe it was because I had such a great connection with Jennifer Bottrell first year. So then second year, you're trying to find that connection with other teammates. And it's no one's fault. It's just, this is what life is. And we have to be able to work through those moments too.
Well, to use only 56 points as motivation to then move on and get the Patty Kazmir Award, that's pretty darn good. All right, we need to move on past your playing career, and let's move into why did you become a coach?
Yeah, I've always loved coaching. I'm more of a teacher than anything else. So I think from a young age, when I was, a junior counselor, they would call, I was able to go out in a local camp and just push pucks. And I was probably 12 years old, and they probably gave me like, a T-shirt, and I was like, yes, this is the best thing ever. From a young age, I'd always been coaching and helping out at camps, and then working as a counselor, and then working as a coach at camps, and really thought the game in that way. So I think as I was transitioning out of my my college experience as a player, then I had the opportunity to coach. It was kind of a natural progression. I was lucky. I had the opportunity to coach at the University of Minnesota Duluth. Even luckier that I won a national championship there. So they had done an incredible job recruiting. I didn't do anything in recruiting there, and came into a really awesome team environment, led by Shannon Miller. Carolyn Willett was also an assistant coach at the time there. So really had a really cool experience where I loved my Harvard experience at the Ivy Leagues, and now got a different experience at Duluth, which was a very international experience, a scholarship school, and got to see a little bit of the differences, but also how there was some commonality as far as like, what environment and what kind of the culture do you want to cultivate on a daily basis.
Gotcha. So I lied. I'm going to actually still ask you a player question. So you were coaching at UMD and at Union while you were still playing hockey.
Yes.
I watched you play some of your last few games for the Canadiens for the Clarkson Cup. And one thing that I noticed is that you actually were playing defense, I believe, in your last
Yeah.
season. Because I remember watching that game vividly and I go, she's a forward. She's playing defense this season. So maybe just explain like how you were so adaptable to play both, forward and defense at the professional level.
Yeah. I think for me, I always loved playing a 200-foot game. I took a lot of pride in trying to create offense, but I also took a lot of pride in trying to be really good defensively. And I think, so as a forward, like that was something I always believed in, right? Not only just let's score goals, let's also be a great defensive forward. So I think I was probably towards the end of my career more known as a defensive forward than I was in generating offense. When I was really little, I did play like, in boys hockey, I did play defense growing up, and then transitioned to around 12 to playing full time in on the forward side. But yeah, just in that experience, I think I was able to be a little adaptable. So even on the national team, there was a couple years where I was actually a defenseman for them on the national team level. To be honest, I didn't skate well enough at the national team level to be a defenseman all the time, but I was smart enough. So it worked out, but they transitioned me back to forward. And so I think the biggest thing is, like, when we're younger, is being exposed to different things. I think sometimes I run into younger players or even older players that say, "Oh, I can only play left wing," and I'm like, you're kind of limiting yourself. Like, why not try to be flexible? So the way I approach our practices with Concordia is that we're really making sure that we're dynamic. We're having our defensemen do offensive drills, do outside drives, do driving the net as if they were an offensive player attacking, because they have to be activated. And then the same side, our forwards in practices, depending on the practice, are taking rushes on a one-on-one like a defenseman. So we have to build that comfort, and the more dynamic we can be, then we can be more flexible within games. We can be more flexible if a scenario arises, and they need someone or myself to play defense. Then hopefully I have a little bit more comfort level to do that. I am also grateful I had great goaltenders and D partners to help me.
But it goes to show you the importance of being really flexible and adaptable to whatever the situation is. You may have extended your career an extra year because of your ability to play defense. So
For sure.
that's it. All right. So we got to get moving to Concordia, but I do have one question. You were playing on the Canadian while you were still at Union College in
Yep.
Schenectady, New York. And for folks who've been living under a rock, you and Hall of Famer Kathleen Willett are married and have two kids, live in
Yeah.
Tessa, and well documented. And we're not going to go too much into that. But here's my most important question. So while you were living in Schenectady and playing for Montreal Canadien, what is the fastest time it took you to drive from Schenectady to Montreal to play in a game? It is normally a 3.5 hour drive, but what's the fastest you've ever done it in?
Because there might be police officers listening to this, 3.5 hours.
Okay. And if there are none, because none of them have kids playing hockey, is it below 2 hours? That's my question.
No, no, never that much, but maybe a little more shy of 3.5. So it
Okay.
was good. But
Okay. Cool.
yeah, no, that was definitely, I was lucky. I was always hoping for good weather because you are going through the mountains up 87 there. So I'm hoping for good weather.
Perfect. All right. So now let's move on to Concordia. Obviously, you're playing in Montreal. Let's talk about my hometown of Montreal. I didn't mention this before we got on here, but I went to McGill. So just so you know,
Ah,
so
still a great school.
yes, but not. We used to be a powerhouse in hockey when we had a wonderful Canadian national team goaltender, but the team hasn't kept up with Concordia. So let's just talk about Concordia University. About 50,000 students. I've been on both campuses and both downtown and the Loyola campus where the rink is. Maybe just talk to folks about the school, the academics, and then maybe even the facilities, Ed Meager Arena, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I've been really proud to be a part of the Concordia environment. The community. It's been great. We actually bought a house within the NDG community, which is on the western part of Montreal Island. And so, as you said, we have two campuses. We have a campus on Loyola side, which is on the western part of the island, and then downtown, right in the center of Montreal. So the downtown campus has kind of academics such as our John Molson School of Business, engineering department. We have our, fine arts, as well as, our language department is down there. As far as the campus that's closer to the athletic facilities, which is the Loyola campus, and it's about a 20-minute shuttle between. There's a free shuttle that goes back and forth really consistently throughout the day. But the campus that we're closest to are more the natural sciences, the social sciences, as well as, we have a communications department that's here. Our leisure studies program is really popular as well. So two campuses, two different feels. Downtown, you're right in the heart of the city. So you're within the city streets feeling. And then the Loyola one, a little bit more of that kind of, not rural, but that community feel where we have a bit of a quad setup, a little more green space in this environment. But as far as the opportunities for our players to study a lot of different things, to have a great student athlete balance, I've been really proud to be able to create that with our university, with our department, to have that balance, because it's challenging to be a student athlete. You're spending 20, 30 hours extra. So you want to have good relationships within the universities to be able to have our players be supported and be successful on the academic side, and not only be on the athletic side. That's my job as a coach, is to make sure both those aspects are taken care of. And that's something we pride ourselves on, and our players are able to have that experience and be able to explore a lot of different programs, because we have, a ton of programs. So there's something there that's available for players to be able to pursue different avenues.
Gotcha. All right. So, how were you able to build such a powerhouse over the last 8 to 10 years? Obviously, you have an amazing assistant coach. With Caroline with you. Maybe just talk about how you built it, and kind of your recruiting process to get the highest level players.
Yeah, yeah. I think in recruiting, it's always one of those things where you're just trying to share who we are and what we believe in. I think that's the number one thing. Everyone in their recruiting process, student athletes, they should be figuring out for themselves, what do I want in my experience? What are the things that are important to me? And there's a variety of things. There's no right or wrong answers, but I really encourage every student athlete to make sure they figure out what's important to them. Not their parents, because they're not ultimately living the experience, but each student athlete figure out, what do you actually want in your experience? And that might be, okay, I want to be in a city, or I want to be in a small town. I want to, whatever it is. I like a big classrooms. I like small classrooms. Academic programs specifically, not that important right now because I don't want to go really specifically into medicine or something that needs, a certification, for example. Those are the questions that student athletes need to ask. And so our job is to, one, share as much as we can about Concordia. What do we believe in? What's our environment? What's our philosophy as coaches? Um, what can the university offer in the academic side? What can we offer as far as support to our student athletes academically to make sure that they excel? What can we offer in the different resources we provide outside of just, say, straight hockey or straight academics, but in leadership training, in mental performance coach, and those aspects. And so I think that that's a really big part, is sharing as much information as we can with the student athletes and understand and being really clear what our culture is, our culture of team first, and sharing that to every single person that comes into our program or considering our program. And then when they're in our program, reiterating it very often so that we make sure that our dynamic culture stays the culture that we want to be in the environment we want to be. So I think that that's been really important, because you don't want to share only some information with student athletes, because then when they come, they're like, oh, I wasn't expecting this, I wasn't expecting that. We try to share everything, and we'll be honest in our responses. And because every place has challenges, every place has great things of it, and every place has areas they recognize that they're improving on. And that's no different from us to other universities, whether it's in the States or in Canada. So I think that's what we try to do in our process, and then help our student athletes that are considering it figure out, okay, what do they actually want? Because some know and some don't. So we want to help them in that process too.
Yeah, so related to that, you talked about the culture and bringing over the team first, philosophy from Harvard. How do you set those overall goals with the players for what they want to do, both on the ice and off the ice? Because I understand, the goal setting is a key part of your process with each player.
Yeah, so we've kind of had a living document that's been molded throughout the years. Right now, like, we have like a goal sheet that we reevaluated at the end of last season. So then for there, that set the tone for the summer, and then set the tone for our preseason. And then in the fall, when our full team comes back together, our new team comes together again, we'll reevaluate it probably 2-3 weeks within it. That preseason, we'll go over our goals and check in, and, hey, are these still our goals? Are these our values? This is what we want. Then we go through the first half. In January, we'll reevaluate again. And then at the end of the season, we'll reevaluate once more, and always adjusting, adapting. And those are really actually powerful sessions for us, because we have the document that's working. Our players have seen it. They know it. They've really molded to what it says on it. It's not our words, it's our players' words. And it goes from not only focusing on, okay, these are our outcome goals. These are end of the season big goals. We want to, finish first in the RCQ. We want to win a national championship. You have those, whatever those are, but those are kind of a small section that's quick hits. And the things that are bigger on that goal sheets are, what are our daily, how do we live daily? Like, what are our daily objectives, of what do we want to accomplish? Like, what is our culture? And from those, that ultimately stems and allows us to try to achieve those bigger outcome goals. But without those everyday focuses and how we treat each other, how we execute the effort we put in, we're not going to get to the goals that we want. So I think I've been really, really proud of our players for being able to have that one daily focus, that one game focus as best we can, and not just thinking, okay, let's get to nationals. Well, we might not ever get to nationals if we don't take care of what we're doing now. And last season, with the success we had, our team actually did a really, really amazing job at doing that.
Yeah, so let's talk about nationals and let's talk about staying focused. So you were able to meet your ultimate on ice objective goal of winning a national championship. But let me ask you this: final game against Waterloo, 2:39 left. Your D
Mhm.
takes a penalty, and you're only up 2-1.
Yep.
What's going through your mind at that point? You're only up a goal in the final game, and your D, I think it was I can't remember, it was a cross check or an interference right in front of the
Kind
net.
of like a little hook trip, a little bit of everything. The girl
Yeah,
cut back on her.
yeah. What's going through your mind at that point?
I think for us, it's now trust the process and trust what our preparation. So there's no time as coaches to pause, to wonder, to worry. I think for us, like, the biggest thing is like, okay, let's have a big penalty kill now. They scored actually on us on the power play right away. starting the third period to cut that lead because we were up 2-0 to cut it to 2-1. So I think we had already talked about, okay, what adjustment are we going to make on it? Obviously not leaving someone wide open in the back door for a pass. So we already talked about that, and we had already had, I believe, another penalty kill earlier on in that third period where we made that adjustment. So I think for us, you have to trust your preparation, and then you make the call and you go out and you trust your players to go and you give them the confidence to be able to go out there and execute. And does that mean that we would ultimately? No, there's no guarantees, but you want to instill confidence in them to go out and do their best to try to do that. And I think when they stepped on the ice, that's what they did.
Perfect. Yeah, and I don't remember if it was a shorthanded goal, but I know within the last 2 minutes, you guys were able to score a third goal to put yourselves up 3-1 and
Yeah,
and
we
seal the
did get a
deal.
short-handed goal by Jesse
Yeah,
Modrapo, so
yeah.
we'll take
Okay.
that any day of the week.
Perfect. All right. We're going to start transitioning a little bit into recruiting, but before we go there, Emma your top player, got drafted to the PWHL, so that's awesome. Just so folks understand the high quality of play that you do have on your team,
Mhm.
and that it's not just NCAA players that are getting recruited or drafted to the PWHL. One of your top players did as well. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the PWHL, and then I'll get into some coaching stuff right after. We'll just talk about the PWHL first.
Yeah, inspiring. It's absolutely amazing. For Carolyn and myself, like we decided to buy season tickets to the Montreal team, to support them. It was important for us, and so we did that. And some games we couldn't go, so we give them away, and we bring our two young daughters to go. And I'll be honest, they like to wave at poo. So Mary Fupulaine and Laura Stacy are two good friends of ours, and our daughters adore them, as well as Erin Ambrose. So there's players on the team they know a little bit closer, so they cheer for them. Otherwise, they're there for the candy and the popcorn. But I think for them to be able to be exposed to that and to be watching women's hockey and in that arena and be excited about it, but also think that this is the normal, I think it's pretty awesome. And so for myself to be able to go into the rink and actually be a super fan, I think one of our last games I wore the Montreal jersey. I was cheering. I was going nutty because it's cool, and I felt so invested as a fan. And I think it was a really special moment for us as a family, but then for myself to be sitting in the stands to watch the game, the high pace, the high level, and see what's available for our women's hockey players now, and also that it's really just still only scratching the surface.
Just getting underway. Imagine where it's going to be 4 or 5
Yes.
years from now. So let's talk about your coaching aspirations. Obviously, with the success that you've had, you got to be getting phone calls, and basically every school that you've coached at has had an opening in the last year. Harvard had an opening. UMD just had an opening. Union is still open. So by the way, if now's a good time if you want to break the news. If you're going to be going to Union, let me know. But in addition, there's the PWHL opportunities, and we've also seen the professional and the NHL opportunities. With the Seattle Kraken. Hiring a female assistant coach. I'm just wondering, there's in Laval, the Montreal Canadiens have an AHL team, and
Yeah.
also, Bridgeport, where you have your summer camp. The Bridgeport Islanders have a team there. You could be going home. If you got a call from one of these places, is that something that you would consider in terms of moving to taking the next step in your coaching career?
We've been really fortunate for everything we've experienced. And yes, we've had calls. Like all of us have calls, and that's part of the process, but we're always for us like evaluating as a family, what's the best thing? What's the best thing for us on the professional side, but what's the best thing for our family? And that's always going to be our driving force. And I think it's one of the great things that both Carolyn and I are within the hockey realm, but it's to some extent the challenging part too, because we both are passionate and we both want to be able to coach and be together, and we're going to make sure that we're making decisions so that we can all live the lives that we really want to live and excel. So I think that's always something, but it's important and it's flattering and it's cool to look at different opportunities. But I would say that I love what I do at Concordia. I love the environment. I've been really, really blessed to have great supporters within the university. Our president, Graham Carr, is incredible. He's been awesome, and he's really a personable president. Like when our players have significant moments where they excel, they get personalized letters from the president of our school. Like it's pretty awesome. He comes to our games regularly, despite the busyness of his of what he does on a daily basis. Our athletic director Darcy Ryan is unbelievable as well. So I feel really well supported at Concordia. We continue to grow. We continue to have great abilities and support to try our best to continue to grow resources for our players. And I'm really proud of what we can provide. And I think one of the really cool things about are working with student athletes at the university level is they're old enough so we don't have to handhold as much. All right, to some extent they understand the game and they're starting to develop and they want to get better and we are able to coach at this high level, but we also have this unique ability and opportunity and responsibility to develop them as people, so that in their 4 or 5 years at U Sports, they have the opportunity to play, which is a bonus. We hopefully can help develop them as people, develop their voice, develop their confidence, so that when they leave Concordia, they have the opportunity to be great leaders in their own way, because we're all going to lead in different ways in whatever field that they want to go into. And I think that's the exciting part about university coaching, is that we get that opportunity to be student athletes. When you get to the pros, there is a level of excitement. Obviously, not only the resources, the focus of just that, but the job is a business. It changes a little bit and the intention changes. And not saying it's right or wrong, or that's not something to consider down the line, but there are differences in the coaching approach as far as well as like the environment and ultimate goals. You got to win at the pro level. You have to, that's a business. And at the university level, yes, we want to win. I'm not, but we also want to develop awesome people and make sure we don't win at the stake. I can't think of the wording, but at the expense of the development side as well.
Yes, no doubt about it. The tenure of university and college coaches is much longer than professional coaches. Even in the PWHL, there's been some changes to at both the player level and the management level. So you brought this up with the 5 years of being able to play at Canadian University. Maybe just talk about how Canadian and Canadian hockey, women's hockey work. Compare that to the NCAA experience. What are the differences and what are the similarities?
Yeah, no, I think that now where women's hockey has grown, because the pool of hockey players is much better than when I played, right? It's much larger because now young girls have been exposed to hockey at a younger age, and just the Olympics have allowed the growth of girls and women's hockey to explode. So I do think that's one of the benefits, is now because the pool of hockey players are better and larger, now we have the opportunity to fill the NCAA and U Sports with tremendous players. There's not only just a small pool that is getting spread out or only going to the NCAA. I think that if you're looking at a lot of the U Sports teams, there's a lot of really talented players that are playing at the U Sports level that either twofold: one, remained in Canada because they wanted to stay in Canada, like the experience that they got to have as a student athlete, or they returned. They went part-time for a little bit in the NCAA and decided that they wanted to return home for whatever reasons, right? And that's not to say negative on the NCAA. There's different reasons for decisions. So I think that there's a lot of really quality players and quality experiences. And I love my experience in NCAA. I love my coaching experience. I loved growing up in the States and getting a chance to play. So I do think, as far as experience wise, both have the capability of creating really great experiences. As far as game structure, playoffs, going for a national championship, those are all the same. Like, you have that opportunity to build, you have that opportunity to have an awesome season wherever you are. Some of the differences that you're going to find, and this could be school to school within U Sports, it could be school to school within the NCAA, and then also NCAA to U Sports, is just the amount of resources that each university has, right? Programs in the NCAA, especially, that have huge football programs that bring in millions and millions of dollars and basically fund athletic departments. Yeah, they do have some resources that are really tough to be able to counter, because they might have their own women's hockey rink, right? Like, they have some of those resources. But then there's other ones that have less, and that's just part of it. But it doesn't mean that those that maybe don't have the same level of resources don't still have great resources and still don't create and can still in a lot of ways create really great experiences. And so we're similar to that one where, no, we're not going to necessarily have the excessive resources available. But we have a lot of great resources. Our players get their equipment head to toe. We pay for the travel. We take preseason trips. Last year, we flew out to British Columbia to play exhibition games there. We pay for the flights and the hotels and that experience. Same thing, we've got meals that we're able to provide closer to our games when we're in our environment. So there are a lot of really good resources to experience there. I think one of the big differences right now, and just in full honesty, is in the NCAA, when someone has a full scholarship, it is tuition and fees as well as room and board. So it includes both. In youth sports, when someone gets a full scholarship, oftentimes it is covering just tuition and fees. It doesn't include the room and board. So that is a big difference between the states if you're getting a full scholarship or in Canada. One of the differences, though, is that Canadian universities, the cost of tuition and fees is a lot less than it is in the States. So if you are a student athlete that's going down and maybe only getting a half scholarship, then you actually might be playing a lot more than if you were going to come and stay in Canada and be able to play there because of the exchange rate, as well as just the cost of tuition and what you might get in a financial package or a scholarship if it's not a full scholarship.
Yeah, folks should take a look at how much Canadian university costs, especially within Canada. It's crazy cheap compared to the U.S.
Yeah.
And even for Americans to go to Canada, I actually have a bunch of my friends who are sending their kids to a Canadian school just because go for the experience. And McGill has a pretty good reputation, and so therefore, they're sending their kids there. Now, I'm sure a lot of parents want to understand the level of hockey in comparison between the level that you play versus NCAA. I know you played 2 preseason games or exhibition games last year against Dartmouth and Harvard, I believe it was.
Yeah.
So they you won both those games against them. So
Yeah.
now for all the other Canadian teams that played a U.S. team, they all lost. So there were 10 games from like University of Toronto, New Brunswick, and I forget who the third team was. But you won both your games. So pretty comparable in terms of if you're playing at the highest level in Canada, you're pretty much playing at the almost the top 10 level in the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I think everything goes year by year, right? Like
Yeah.
there's some teams that are really strong, and then some years where we have a really good mix and depth that you need to be able to compete against other top teams. And then some years you have some areas that are a little bit weaker or a little bit that need more development. So, I think for us, we've been really fortunate in the last years that we've had really, really strong teams. We've had a lot of players from Quebec in particular that had chances to go to the NCAA on full rides, but chose to stay within Quebec because they wanted to, one, come to Concordia, but ultimately stay in Quebec and be closer to family and be able to utilize the 5 years also of development. So we've been really blessed and honored and lucky to be able to have that. And so we've been able to then go down and play teams in the States and be really successful and have good success against them. So this upcoming season, we'll play 3 games for sure down in our preseason, and then we're trying to add a 4th game. Not sure if that's going to happen, but be able to get 3 games. So I think it's fun for us to play new teams, to play different teams that we don't necessarily get to all the time, and definitely always a good challenge and good preseason trip to get a chance to do that. So I think we're excited for that opportunity. But quality, again, it goes back to the pool of players is better and better. And so because our pool of players is better, to be able to have a lot of really good teams, you're going to have a lot of good U Sports teams and NCAA teams that will be really competitive with each other and comparable to each other.
Yeah. And for folks who don't know, Cami Granato, one of the legends also of American hockey, played at Concordia. And so,
Yeah.
what's your pitch for some Americans to come up to Canada? Because it's been many years since a true 100% American, has played at Concordia.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think one of them is the actual city of Montreal is incredible. It's really fun. It's great. And although we're in a Quebec province, Concordia is an English university. So, and Montreal itself is a really bilingual city. So everywhere you go, if you didn't know French, you're still going to be able to be perfectly fine because everyone mostly knows and understands English. So I think that just the experience of being in a unique and awesome city that's bilingual, metropolitan, is really fun. The school itself offers really great opportunities for studying a lot of various different things in the social sciences to engineering to business to we probably have it in some capacity, which is really fun to see. And I think the hockey itself is still an incredible experience. Like ultimately, I always say that being a student athlete in university was some of the best times of my life. And not to say that my Olympic experiences weren't, but there's something really different from being able to spend 5 years, 4 or 5 years with the same age group players with the same mindset, same schedules, and experiencing that together. That's really special. And also growing together in a different way. Because when you get to a national team or you get to the professional, everyone's coming into those environments in a very different place. We have some people that are still in college, an occasional high school still person, if you're Caroline Harvey and some of those players. But then you have people that have kids already. And so it's different. The dynamic's different, the environment's different. So if you can find a university place and experience where you feel the environment is really special and awesome and fits, then everything else, whether it's the locker room itself, whether it's super nice or just good, that doesn't really matter. It's what is the locker room filled with? What are the people like? What's the overall experience like? And that's the most important thing, I think, in choosing an environment is how do you feel and do you feel at home?
Love it. Love it. All right. Last two questions. Can you just explain to folks the difference in the recruiting cycle from a Canadian university versus the NCAA? Because NCAA, June 15th of your junior year, I believe it is, that's a big date. Do
Mhm.
Canadian universities, have any restrictions on talking to players? And do they wait for like players to commit to the US, or are you going out right away and trying to get, trying to, beat them to the punch and have exploding offers so that they commit to your school instead of an American school?
Yeah, no, we don't have any restrictions. I think for us, we can reach out to them whenever we want. I think it's more so coaches have to figure out what actually makes sense for their program in recruitment and different things. So, I think that one of the things that ended up happening at NCAA, and then they were able to put more rules in place, was it became a bit of the Wild West where they were talking with middle school student athletes. And I think that's to their credit, they figured out, okay, how do we reel this back and how do we put some things into place so we become more reasonable in what recruiting should be like. So I do think it's still fairly similar in regards to can they use sports and when we kind of contact student athletes. Obviously there might be some coaches that are going for middle school players or whatnot, but for myself, I'm not yet, because again, I'm going and recruiting players. We might be identifying players that are good and maybe doing little touches or saying hi or whichever. But as far as really recruiting, you want to recruit players that know a bit of what they want and want to in their experience, right? Because if you commit someone for their school and you're like, oh, let's beat them there and they'll commit to us. Well, in those 4 years, they might actually develop as a person and realize that they committed to us without really knowing what they wanted, and it actually isn't a good fit. And so you might not know that they might still come, but in year one, they might not like it because it's not what they expected it is. So I do think like you want to start to maybe start the process 3 years out from when they're going to graduate. And then in the second 2 years out for me, then it's a little bit more of the serious, okay, let's get you on campus, let's check it out and let's really get a feel, because you should probably need to know what you want in your experience. And then somewhere in that process, 2 years out through getting closer to their final year of high school, or sage up if you're from Quebec, that's when people will start to make their decisions. But I think the timing for me, that kind of makes sense. And it lets people do their experience in their exploration, to visit schools, to talk to other coaches. If someone says, oh, I'm talking to these coaches, I'm like, okay, great. Because you want everyone, again, go back to having all the information that they need, have the feel that they need so that they can make the best decision for themselves. And in the same way, the coaches are doing the same thing. We're constantly evaluating, and we ultimately have to come back down to our list of this is our ranking, or these are our players that we're really going for. And yeah, sometimes we do have a second tier that we eventually go for that are still great candidates, but similar to recruits, they're going through the same process, right? And we have to be okay that both are going through that process, and we try to be as honest we can within that, so that we can feel good about it, whatever way it ends up happening, where both the student athlete and the university, Concordia, say, yes, this is an awesome fit, let's do this. And now we've gone through all the information as much as we could to make sure that it is going to be a great experience when they come.
Gotcha. So you kind of already answered my last question, but maybe I'll take it in a slightly different direction, which
Perfect.
is, what advice do you have for parents or players who, are able to talk, at least in the U.S., talk to coaches, but maybe your advice might be to come consider opportunities in Canada. But what advice do you have for parents or players who are going through the process that aren't finding, the schools having the interest that they have in them?
Yeah, no, I think part of it is one, continuing to whatever team you are, you go to the showcases. Showcases, yes. I think sometimes I want to. Again, I'm not a parent right now. I'm not a current student athlete, so I didn't have to go through the same experience. But I would say just be cognizant of what's best for you and your development, and whether going to 6 showcases in a summer is actually the best thing for you as a player to develop, to also get seen, but then also financially, right? It has to be this balance because you still want to develop. I think the time that you're spending with maybe doing a showcase or two, maybe, and then using the rest of the time for development is even more important, because during the year, if your team is playing within these tournaments where a lot of coaches go, you will be seen. So those are a lot of it. Now, if you aren't, I think you can be more proactive and you can reach out to coaches to be able to give them some information about you. And I think in that, I think some of the important information that we're always knowing is not only birth year, because sometimes birth year doesn't align to graduation year. I think it's more important to know, yes, you can give your birth year, but then also when are you graduating? Because there might be a little bit of a different, right? Like in Quebec,
Especially if
if
you're from
you're,
Quebec and I got
yeah,
CEGEP involved, it gets
exactly.
very
Or
confusing.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Or maybe you took an extra year of school somewhere, or maybe you were already considering a gap year, right? So I think giving information of what's your graduation year, and yeah, are you interested or potentially open to a gap year? That's always helpful right off the bat. If you have a quick little highlight video and can make it really clear and send it so they can click and look right away without having to go and search through different platforms, then that's always really helpful. And then you can always have kind of twofold. One, a little highlight you put together that highlights the different things that you're doing, but then also sometimes it's like, oh, if you want to access to some full games, because sometimes the full game is also important, not just the things we pick out that are highlights. I get it. Then they have the option to looking at some full games, and then just references, contact information for coaches that can help just yeah be a good reference. I think those are important parts to be able to reach out and be able to have that. So that's the quick information. If I didn't know a student athlete, that helps me at least get a quicker hit. And then from there, it's my responsibility as a coach to follow up to see, are there other times to be able to go see this person in person? If it looks like it's a fit, to then check them out in person, to then follow up with conversations. That's my job as a coach, to be able to take those next steps.
Perfect. And then I'll take this opportunity to give a plug then for Champs app because it provides all those things if someone puts together a profile and they
Awesome.
could send it to you. But now let me give you the opportunity you can plug some of the camps that you've been involved with. I know you work with the 1329 camp. You've had your own camps in Bridgeport, Connecticut. You've also done adult camps in the past. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're still doing those. Maybe just talk about some of the camps that you do during the summer.
Yeah, I'm really blessed. Like I love to coach and we love to do it. So in the summer, we're actually about to kick off our 1329 camps. So Carolyn Willette and Mary Fou Pelaine, they started camps together for many years now. So in the summers, we run them out of Concordia at the time being, and it's been really fun. So we have our adults starting on Friday, and it's incredible how their camps, not surprisingly, have really exploded, and what a great experience and overall experience on and off ice they provide. So they do a 2.5 day adult camp. And once registration opens, they have 3 sold out groups within, you know, minutes. Same thing. They have an elite camp this following week at Concordia too, and that'll be really fun. I believe the age range is maybe 11 to 16. I might be a little off. I'm not in the organizational part, but that's a really great camp as well. And then we'll do another one in August on the weekend that kind of is a mix of kind of like single letter players, as well as maybe a group of elite players as well in the double and triple letters. So it's really fun. Actually, my youngest, Liv Chualette, will be going and participating in the weekend camp in August as a single letter person, as she was just a U7 learn to skate last year. And we'll see if the coaches like her, or we decide that she is the monster on ice. That is to be determined.
Perfect. And has she decided, Liv, your oldest daughter, who I believe is 5 or 6 these days,
Yeah,
so
six.
she 6, has she decided which country she's going to play for? Have you guys figured that out yet? She's old enough to make her own decisions. Has that been figured out yet?
Yeah, I think she's just deciding if she actually likes hockey. And I'm just saying it honestly, but no, I think the best part is she does have a little bit more of singing "O Canada" over "O Say Can You See" right now. So I would say that she is leaning towards Canada, but at least our youngest is trying to play like a little bit of the neutral Switzerland right now, and says, but USA is good too. So
All right.
hopefully they have a appreciation for both.
All right. Well, stay tuned and we'll see how this evolves over the next 10 to 13 years.
Sounds
Beautiful.
good.
Julie, I want to thank you so much for doing this. Honor to have you on here. Really appreciate you taking the time, obviously, talking all about your playing career, but even more so learning about Concordia, learning about the youth sports world, and not only the recruiting part of it, but also just the actual competition level. So thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ray. I really appreciate it too.
I really want to thank Julie for joining me on the podcast. She had just an amazing playing career and she is continuing to do great things as a coach. I look forward to seeing what the future holds for her, as I am sure there are even bigger things to come in her future. You can connect with Julie on the Concordia website or via her Champs app profile. Links to both are in the show notes. Champs app is your recruiting and development co-pilot. Champs app helps athletes, coaches, parents, and agents/advisors navigate the world of youth sports. We recently completely redesigned Champs app so that all our offerings fit together seamlessly to dramatically improve the user experience. Next time you visit Champs app, you will see that it is much easier to use Champs app as your co-pilot for recruiting and development. While we will continue to provide free content and tools like podcasts, articles, and directories on our website, some new content will require a free Champs app account to access special analysis and information. We have made it easy to create a free Champs app account without the need to create an online profile. Our latest free tool is the Champs app Team Coach Directory, a powerful resource designed to simplify your search for D1, D3, and youth sports coaches in one convenient place. Whether you're a parent, player, or youth coach, our directory offers a seamless way to find, research, connect, or message coaches across women's college hockey. In addition, our first premium product has been the Champs app messaging tool, which is the fast, easy way to send error-free messages to coaches. Champs app messaging cuts the time to send emails to coaches by over 50%. Over the coming months, we will continue to offer additional premium tools and services to our community. We still have a long way to go to achieve all the big goals we have for Champs app. You will see new offerings being released over the coming months. So look out for more announcements on social media, in your email, and in the app. We look forward to helping you on your journey as your sports recruiting and development co-pilot.